members of the Congress, it is my great privilege, and I deem it a high honor and personal pleasure, to present to you His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel. Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the Prime Minister of Israel, His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu.
Three addresses to joint meetings of Congress for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and three introductions. House Speaker Newt Gingrich on July 10, 1996, House Speaker John Boehner on May 24, 2011, and Speaker Boehner again March 3, 2015. Benjamin Netanyahu is setting a few Congress records, his fourth address to a joint meeting of Congress, the most ever by a foreign leader, and his introduction in 2024 by Speaker Mike Johnson marks the fourth time he has been introduced by a Republican speaker. In this episode of C-SPAN's podcast, The Weekly, we remember the first three times Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to Congress, what he said to appeal to members of the House and Senate and to American audience, and what he said to the vice president sitting behind him for one of his three speeches, Joe Biden. Benjamin Netanyahu made his first speech to Congress nearly 30 years ago next month. With this fourth speech, he becomes the foreign leader with the greatest number of formal addresses to Congress. It breaks a tie at 3 with Winston Churchill. Netanyahu also sets a record for the longest time between his first speech and his most recent. And another record set by his entire country. With Benjamin Netanyahu's fourth speech, Israel takes over first place for greatest number of total speeches by leaders of a foreign country to a joint meeting of Congress, 10 times by an Israeli prime minister or president. It breaks a tie for first place at 9 with France. Next is the United Kingdom, 8 times, and Winston Churchill with 3 of those. And next, a tie, Mexico and Ireland, with 7 times one of their leaders has addressed Congress. What has Benjamin Netanyahu been saying to Congress for the last 3 decades? A close look reveals a few common themes and rhetorical strategies, starting with appeals to both parties, like in 2011.
And I do see a lot of old friends here. And I see a lot of new friends of Israel here as well. Democrats and Republicans alike.
Another mention of both parties in 2015.
I want to thank you all for being here today. I know that my speech has been the subject of much controversy. I deeply regret that some perceive my being here as political. That was never my intention. I want to thank you, Democrats and Republicans, for your common support for Israel, year after year, decade after decade.
And as he was about to begin speaking in 1996, Benjamin Netanyahu left the podium to go back on the floor to shake hands with Ted Kennedy and other Democratic senators. That 1996 speech came a year after Republicans took over the House of Representatives. Prime Minister Netanyahu used economic language reflecting the new rhetoric coming from both Congress and the White House.
We're committed to turning Israel's economy into a free market of goods and ideas. And I believe that such a free market of goods and ideas is the only way to bring ourselves to true economic independence. And this means free enterprise, privatization, open capital markets, an end to cartels, lower taxes, deregulation. You know, there's not a Hebrew word for deregulation. By the time this term of office in Israel is over, there will be a Hebrew word for deregulation. But may I say something that unites all of us across the political divide? I'm committed to reducing the size of government, and I'm quoting Speaker Gingrich, quoting President Clinton, saying that the era of big government is over. It's over in Israel, too.
In 2011, Netanyahu opened his remarks directed to then Vice President Joe Biden.
Vice President Biden, Speaker Boehner, distinguished senators, members of the House, honored guests, I'm deeply moved by this warm welcome. And I'm deeply honored that you've given me the opportunity to address Congress a second time. Mr. Vice President, do you remember the time that we were the new kids in town?
Benjamin Netanyahu involved Vice President Biden later on in his speech, too.
The truth is that Israel needs unique security arrangements because of its unique size. It's one of the smallest countries in the world. Mr. Vice President, I'll grant you this. It's bigger than Delaware. It's even bigger than Rhode Island, but that's about it. Israel on the 1967 lines would be half the width of the Washington Beltway. Now, here's a bit of nostalgia. I came to Washington 30 years ago as a young diplomat. It took me a while, but I finally figured it out. There is an America beyond the Beltway.
In 2015, Vice President Biden wasn't behind him. Republican Senator Orrin Hatch was in the top seat on the rostrum for senators, next to House Speaker Boehner. But Netanyahu still began with remarks directed at Harry Reid, the top Democratic senator, a few weeks after he had surgery.
Speaker of the House, John Boehner, President Pro Temp, Senator Orrin Hatch, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, and House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy. I also want to acknowledge Senator Democratic Leader Harry Reid. Harry, it's good to see you back on your feet. I guess it's true what they say, you can't keep a good man down. My friends, I'm deeply humbled by the opportunity to speak for a third time before the most important legislative body in the world, the U.S. Congress.
In his 2015 speech, Netanyahu cited another prominent Democrat, a former senator and member of President Obama's cabinet, John Kerry.
Iran's supreme leader says that openly. He says Iran plans to have 190,000 centrifuges, not 6,000, or even the 19,000 that Iran has today, but 10 times that amount. 190,000 centrifuges enriching uranium. With this massive capacity, Iran could make the fuel for an entire nuclear arsenal, and this in a matter of weeks, once it makes that decision. My longtime friend, John Kerry, Secretary of State, confirmed last week that Iran could legitimately possess that massive centrifuge capacity when the deal expires.
Netanyahu also joked about his own government. In 1996, after sustained bipartisan applause, here were his opening words.
If I can only get the Knesset to vote like this.
He joked about the Knesset again in 2011.
There was a great English writer in the 19th century, George Eliot. It's a she. That was a pseudonym in those days. George Eliot predicted over a century ago that once established, the Jewish state, here's what she said, the Jewish state will shine like a bright star of freedom amid the despotisms of the East. Well, she was right. We have a free press, independent courts, an open economy, rambunctious parliamentary debates. Now don't laugh. You see, you think you're tough on one another here in Congress? Come spend a day in the Knesset. Be my guest.
By the way, you heard him cite George Eliot in 2011. In 2015, Benjamin Netanyahu cited Robert Frost.
Ladies and gentlemen, history has placed us at a fateful crossroads. We must now choose between two paths. One path leads to a bad deal that will at best curtail Iran's nuclear ambitions for a while, but it will inexorably lead to a nuclear-armed Iran whose unbridled aggression will inevitably lead to war. The second path, however difficult, could lead to a much better deal that would prevent a nuclear-armed Iran, a nuclearized Middle East, and the horrific consequences of both to all of humanity. You don't have to read Robert Frost to know. You have to live life, to know that the difficult path is usually the one less traveled. But it will make all the difference for the future of my country, the security of the Middle East, and the peace of the world, the peace we all desire.
Benjamin Netanyahu also has pointed out specific objects in the House chamber, like in 2011, the podium.
15 years ago, I stood at this very podium. By the way, it hasn't changed. I stood here and I said that democracy must start to take root in the Arab world.
And in 2015, he pointed at one of the 23 marble relief portraits over the gallery doors of the House chamber. The portraits depicting historical figures noted for their work in establishing the principles that underlie American law.
Facing me, right up there in the gallery, overlooking all of us in this august chamber, is the image of Moses. Moses led our people from slavery to the gates of the Promised Land. And before the people of Israel entered the land of Israel, Moses gave us a message that has steeled our resolve for thousands of years. I leave you with his message today. Chizku v'imtzu, al tiru ve'al ta'artzu mipnehem. Be strong and resolute, neither fear nor dread them. My friends, may Israel and America always stand together, strong and resolute. May we neither fear nor dread the challenges ahead.
Also in 2015, he did something similar to what presidents do during State of the Union addresses. He pointed out a guest sitting in the visitors' gallery. This guest sat next to his wife.
My friends, standing up to Iran is not easy. Standing up to dark and murderous regimes never is. With us today is Holocaust survivor and Nobel Prize winner, Elie Wiesel. Elie, your life and work inspire us to give meaning to the words, never again.
And he's even had to react to a protester inside the chamber, 2011.
Now, this historic moment holds the promise of a new dawn of freedom and opportunity. There are millions of young people out there who are determined to change their future. We all look at them. They muster courage. They risk their lives. They demand dignity. They desire liberty. These extraordinary scenes in Tunis and Cairo evoke those of Berlin and Prague in 1989. Yet, as we share their hopes, you know, I take it as a badge of honor, and so should you, that in our free societies you can have protests. You can't have these protests in the farcical parliaments in Tehran or in Tripoli. This is real democracy.
As for the substance of the speeches, Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken about American experiences, like in 1996.
We cannot, and I might say we dare not forget, that more men, women, and children have lost their lives to terrorist attacks in the last 3 years than in the entire previous decade. I know that the representatives of the United States sitting here, the people of the United States, are now becoming tragically familiar with this experience. You've experienced it in places as far afield as New York's World Trade Center, and most recently in Tehran. And I noticed also the recent torchings of Afro-American churches in America, which I must tell you strike a familiar and chilling note among Jews. But I want to try to put the Israeli experience in perspective. And one has to imagine, to do so, to imagine such attacks occurring time and time again in every city, in every corner of this great country.
And more from 1996.
In the 19th century, citizens of all free states viewed France as the great guardian of liberty. In the 20th century, every free person looks to America as the champion of freedom. Yesterday, my wife and I spent a very moving hour at Arlington National Cemetery, and we saw there the evidence of the price you paid for that freedom in the lives of your best and brightest young men. And it's a toll that is exacted from you, from all of us, but from you, these very days.
In 2011, Prime Minister Netanyahu cheered on a specific American success.
We stand together to defend democracy. We stand together to advance peace. We stand together to fight terrorism. Congratulations, America. Congratulations, Mr. President. You got bin Laden. Good riddance.
Benjamin Netanyahu has even made mention of his own country's failings, like he did in 1996.
This isn't the first time that a Prime Minister of Israel addresses a joint meeting of Congress. My immediate predecessor, Shimon Peres, addressed this body, and before him, the late Yitzhak Rabin, who was tragically cut down by a despicable, savage assassin. We're grateful that Israeli democracy has proved resilient enough to overcome this barbaric act. But we shall always carry with us the pain of this tragedy. I recognize, Mr. Speaker, that the great honor you've bestowed on me is not personal. It's a tribute to the unshakable fact that the unique relationship between Israel and the United States transcends politics and parties, governments and diplomacy. It's a relationship between two peoples who share a total commitment to the spirit of democracy, an infinite dedication to freedom.
Similar pro-American words in 1996.
I think it was the terrible misfortune of the Jewish people that in the first half of this century, the United States had not yet assumed its pivotal role in the world. And it has been our great fortune that in the second half of this century, with the miraculous renewal of Jewish nationhood, the United States became the preeminent power in the world. You, the people of America, offered the Jewish state, a fledgling Jewish state, succor and support. You stood by us time and time again against the forces of tyranny and totalitarianism. And I know that I speak for every Israeli and every Jew throughout the world when I say to you today, thank you, people of America.
Finally, has Benjamin Netanyahu spoken about topics which foreshadow what's happening now? Well, here's one from 2011 that's relevant today.
2 years ago, I publicly committed to a solution of two states for two peoples, a Palestinian state alongside a Jewish state. I am willing to make painful compromises to achieve this historic peace. As the leader of Israel, it's my responsibility to lead my people to peace.
And here's another topic which also is still timely and also from that 2011 speech.
But peace can only be negotiated with partners committed to peace. And Hamas is not a partner for peace. Hamas remains committed to Israel's destruction and to terrorism. They have a charter. That charter not only calls for the obliteration of Israel, it says, kill the Jews everywhere you find them. Hamas's leader condemned the killing of Osama bin Laden and praised him as a holy warrior. Now again, I want to make this clear. Israel is prepared to sit down today and negotiate peace with the Palestinian Authority. I believe we can fashion a brilliant future for our children. But Israel will not negotiate with a Palestinian government backed by the Palestinian version of Al-Qaeda. That we will not do.
And now a bonus clip. Benjamin Netanyahu was elected to the Knesset in 1988 and elected Likud party leader in 1993. How did he develop his fluency with the United States and U.S. politics? Here's one of his earliest appearances on C-SPAN. It was December 11th, 1991, our call-in show, when he was Israel's deputy foreign minister.
How much time have you spent in the United States in your life?
Well, I spent here my high school years, and then I went to school here in the United States, and then I came here as ambassador, as you know.
But you went to school at MIT?
I went to MIT.
Got a degree there?
Yes, I did.
And you went 4 years at Pennsylvania in school?
Yeah, I was in high school there. Then I had 5 years in the Israeli army, and then I came back for graduate studies here. Well, undergraduate and graduate studies.
That's it for this episode of C-SPAN's The Weekly. A reminder, you can use the C-SPAN video library to search not just Benjamin Netanyahu, but hear other foreign leaders address Congress too. You'll even find audio of Winston Churchill's January 17, 1952 speech to Congress. It was the first time a foreign leader had addressed Congress on 3 separate occasions.
I have not come here to ask you for money. To ask you for money to make life more comfortable or easier for us in Britain. Our standards of life are our own business, and we can only keep our self-respect and independence by looking after them ourselves. That is why I have come here to ask, not for gold, but for steel, not for favors, but equipment. And that is why many of our requests have been so well and generously met. The sooner strong enough forces can be assembled in Europe under united command, the more effective will be the deterrence against a third world war. If I may say this, members of the Congress, be careful above all things, therefore, not to let go of the atomic weapon until you are sure, and more than sure, that other means of preserving peace are in your hands.
For now, thanks for listening and happy searching.